single time you buy something, you're playing a game, but you might not even know the rules. From that coffee you grabbed this morning to the car you've been saving for, there's a hidden rulebook that governs the whole thing. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and show you exactly what's inside. So think about it for a second. You see something online, you love it, you click buy. It feels so simple, right? Almost instant? But in that one click, what legally just took place? What invisible agreement did you just sign up for? Well, here's the first big secret. That simple purchase was actually a legally binding contract. That's right. Every single sale, no matter how big or small, has a formal structure. It has specific rules, and it has very real consequences for both you and the person selling to you. So let's dive in and uncover this secret rulebook together. We're going to break down the Sale of Goods Act. This is the legal framework that's been shaping our rights as shoppers for almost 100 years. Okay, so first things first, what does the law actually consider a sale? It's not as simple as just swapping money for an item. Turns out there are some very specific ingredients that have to be in the mix. And here it is, the official definition right from the Act itself. Now, let's zoom in on a couple of key phrases here. Transfers the property. That's a fancy way of saying legal ownership changes hands. And for a price. That specifically means for money. This one sentence is the absolute bedrock of every single purchase you make. So, think of it like a checklist. For any sale to be legally sound, you've got to have these 5 things. You need 2 parties, a buyer and a seller. The thing being sold has to be goods, so movable property. There has to be a transfer of ownership, not just handing it over. There has to be a price paid in money, and of course, all the basic elements of a valid contract, like free consent, need to be there. It might seem simple, but every one of these is absolutely crucial. Okay, and this is a really important distinction the law makes. A sale is what happens when you buy a shirt and walk out of the store with it. Boom, ownership is transferred right then and there. But an agreement to sell, that's more like pre-ordering a video game. You've agreed to buy it, but ownership won't transfer until sometime in the future, when the game is actually released. One is a done deal, the other is a promise for a future deal. All right, now this is where things get really interesting. Every single contract of sale comes with a set of built-in promises, terms that are legally implied even if nobody says a word about them. You can think of them as the rules written in invisible ink. You know, it wasn't always this way. Way back when, the rule of the marketplace was simple and pretty harsh. Caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. If you bought something and it turned out to be junk, well, that was your problem. The full responsibility was on you to check every little thing before you handed over your money. But thankfully, the law evolved. The Sale of Goods Act completely flipped the script. It recognized that, hey, it's not always fair or even possible for a buyer to spot every potential problem. So it shifted some key responsibilities squarely onto the seller's shoulders. And these are your shields. These are the main protections you have as a buyer. For example, if you tell a seller you need a waterproof jacket for hiking, the one they sell you better be waterproof. That's fitness for purpose. A new phone has to be of merchantable quality, which just means it has to work like a phone should. And of course, if you buy something based on a description or a sample, what you get has to match it. These are your fundamental rights written into every sale. Now, the law gets even more specific. It splits these unspoken promises into 2 categories, conditions and warranties. And trust me, knowing the difference is a game changer. A condition is so essential, so core to the deal, that if it's broken, the whole contract is off. You can return the item and get your money back. A warranty is more of a minor promise. If it's broken, you can get compensation, but you can't just call off the whole sale. Here's a super simple way to think about it. If you buy a brand new motorcycle and the engine doesn't work, that's a breach of a condition. The bike fails at its main purpose. You can take it back. But if the bike arrives with a small scratch in the paint, that's a breach of a warranty. It's not perfect, but it still works as a motorcycle. You can get some money back for the damage, but you can't return the whole bike for just a scratch. See the difference? All right, let's move on to another huge question. You've made the deal, you've agreed to buy something. But at what exact moment does that item become yours? And maybe more importantly, who's on the hook if it gets damaged before you even get your hands on it? This is where a lot of people get mixed up. You might think it's when you pay, or maybe it's when it gets delivered to your door. But the law has some very specific and sometimes surprising rules about this. And it all boils down to this really powerful 3-word principle from the Act.
Risk follows property. It's a simple idea with huge implications. Basically, whoever legally owns the goods is the one who bears the risk if they get lost, damaged, or destroyed. So the real question is never who's holding it, but who legally owns it right now.
So how do we know when ownership passes? Well, the number one rule is all about what the buyer and seller intended. But if that's not clear, there are default rules. For instance, if you agree to buy a specific TV that's on display and ready to go, you legally own it the moment you make the contract, even before you pay. But if you order a desk that the store has to assemble first, you only become the owner after they finish building it and have let you know it's ready.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time on the buyer side of things. But let's flip the coin for a minute. What happens when the buyer is the one who breaks the deal? What if they just don't pay? Well, the law gives the seller a pretty powerful toolkit to deal with that.
First, let's get the definition straight. Who exactly is an unpaid seller in the eyes of the law? It's pretty simple. It's any seller who hasn't been paid in full, or maybe they were given a payment, like a check, that ended up bouncing. So what's their first move? It's called the right of lien. And honestly, it's pretty straightforward. No pay, no goods. The seller can legally hold on to the product and refuse to hand it over until the payment is made in full. Okay, now this next one is really cool. It's called the right of stoppage in transit. Imagine a seller ships out a big order, but while it's on the truck, they find out the buyer has gone bankrupt. They can actually call the shipping company and legally order them to stop the delivery and bring the goods back. It's basically a legal emergency brake for commerce.
And then there's right number 3, the right of resale. If things really go south, like if the goods are perishable and rotting away, or if the buyer is just ignoring all demands for payment, the seller can actually cancel the original deal and sell the goods to somebody else to try and get their money back.
So when you pull it all together, what does this all really mean? The big takeaway is that the Sale of Goods Act isn't a one-sided weapon for buyers. It creates a balanced, predictable system. It takes what could be a chaotic marketplace and turns it into a structured agreement where both buyers and sellers know exactly where they stand with clear rights and clear duties. And that's pretty much a wrap. You're now in on the secret. You know about the unspoken promises of quality, you know the exact moment that risk and ownership transfer to you, and you know the rights that both you and the seller have if things go wrong. So I guess the only question left is, now that you know the rules of the game, are you going to play it any differently?